Hello, everyone. This is Mike Howard, and I am here with
Bev Howard.
and we're going to do a Bible study. We're on the second lesson in the book of Ezekiel. Today's lesson is going to be in Ezekiel chapter 11, verses 2 through 4, and verses 14 through 21. Title of the lesson is Saves, and that means that God is in the business of saving. And so, now, you don't really think about this part of Ezekiel as being a salvation lesson, and yet Ezekiel has a glimmer of hope for us in chapter 11. But if you take a look at how the book of Ezekiel is broken up, 1 through 4 we covered last week when God commissioned Ezekiel to be his prophet. And then chapters 4 through 24 are where God, through Ezekiel, explains how he is going to judge the city of Jerusalem and all of its occupants, and also the exile situation. Chapters 25 through 32, God explains how he's going to judge the surrounding nations, the nations surrounding Israel. And then a whopping whole bunch of chapters, 15 chapters at the end of Ezekiel. Ezekiel just does a magnificent job because God is showing him the new Jerusalem and the new temple and how all the exiles from God are going to join him there in the new Jerusalem. And that is a whole section called Restoration. And it's just absolutely beautiful. We're going to focus most of our study in the book of Ezekiel, however, in the first part of the book. We do get into one lesson, chapter 37, about the Valley of Dry Bones. You remember that story?
I like that story.
It's a good story. So last week, and I looked everywhere for a good drawing of this, but last week, Ezekiel has this vision. God actually comes to Ezekiel while Ezekiel is on the banks of a river in exile in Babylon. He appears to Ezekiel, and that's where he tells Ezekiel that what he wants him to do. And this is, I think, as good a drawing as I could come up with. And it comes from the Bible Project. They do a magnificent job. If you've got a chance, go to their Bible book overview for the book of Ezekiel. It comes in two parts. It's great. Okay, so this is God on his throne. The throne is on a platform. The platform is supported by cherubim. Now, the last time we saw something that looked anything like this, it was on the Ark of the Covenant, where the cherubim, where the mercy seat was, and they are actually there positioned right there on top of the Ark of the Covenant. So representing the presence of God, which is what they're doing here. And so these four creatures, which are called, he recognizes them later as cherubim, are supporting this throne. And they come. And now, I did not really pay any attention to the fact that God is showing up in Babylon. Instead of grabbing Ezekiel and taking him to the temple in Jerusalem, God makes the journey. And it's going to turn out that that's a big deal in the lesson today. So stay with me. That was a teaser.
I'm looking forward.
Highlights from week 1. God shows up in Babylon. I already made that point. He commissions Ezekiel and he says, your job, Ezekiel, and he doesn't even really give him a choice. You got to listen to my words, and then you got to understand them. It goes from your head to your heart, and then once you've understood them, I want you to speak those words to the Jews. And then he said, you're going to warn the people about an impending judgment, but I'm going to tell you ahead of time, they aren't going to listen. Matter of fact, they're going to throw rocks at you. They're going to try to kill you. They're going to turn their backs on you. They are just going to be furious with the message that you've got to tell them. So just be prepared. Don't be afraid. I'm going to be with you. But understand, they are stiff-necked. They are obstinate. They are rebellious. And so, about this time, Ezekiel's going, oh man, what a great job this is. And he says,
again and again.
And again. And he says, but let me tell you one more thing, Ezekiel. You're going to be tempted to just blow this off and say, well, they're not going to listen anyway, so what's the point of telling them? But I'm telling you, your job is to give them my word. And I think that was a great message for me last week about us with the gospel message for people around us, our friends, people we run into, that we really don't have a choice. We've got the good news. And even though we think or we may be afraid that they're going to reject it, We don't really have a choice in that. God says, that's the good news. You need to tell people about it. This is going to be hard for you to see, but it's an exile timeline. And it starts in BC 605. The Babylonians are beginning to be an empire. They're taking territory away from the current empire, which is Egypt and Assyria. And they're just conquering everybody. And in the process of doing all that, they actually conquer the part of the territory that we call Judah. And so they come in and they leave the king in place, but what they do is they take a lot of the royal family back to Babylon with them. And that's when Daniel goes back. And we call that the first wave. The second wave happens later when the king died, his son takes over, and they decide they want to revolt. And that's when Nebuchadnezzar comes in and says, oh, no, 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 we're not going to have any of that. So he takes 10,000 Jews back with him on the second wave, including the prophet, or the soon-to-be prophet, Ezekiel. He goes back. And Ezekiel then in 593 has a vision, and that was last week's lesson. He begins to prophesy, and then Jerusalem and the temple are completely destroyed in only 7 years after that. So the warning that Ezekiel is giving to the people in Jerusalem is only a 7-year warning. He's got to tell them really, really quickly because God's judgment is impending. And then once the temple and the Jerusalem are destroyed, there is a third wave of Jews that come back to Babylon. And then in 539, Babylon is conquered by Persia, Cyrus II. By the way, the Jews in exile in Babylon were treated really, really well. And we're not exactly sure why. It could be that Daniel was really making a difference. It could be that God just stepped in and said, I want you to treat my people well. But we know that God and Nebuchadnezzar did have conversations. So the fall of Babylon, Cyrus II came in and said, okay, Jews, you can go back to your city. And so the Jews went back, they rebuilt the temple. So that for 70 years, they had been in exile, and now they had rebuilt the temple. Almost 100 years later, Nehemiah comes back from Babylon and rebuilds the walls of Jerusalem. And then only 40 years after that, we begin this period that's called the quiet period or the silent period between the testaments. And that's so God has now, through this exile and this bringing the people back from exile, God has set the stage 400 years before Christ is born. He's set the stage for the birth of the Messiah. So all that we're talking about here is in this section right there, and that is where Ezekiel is prophesying and warning the people. So God saves. That's what we're going to talk about today. But there's a huge, and I do mean huge, plot twist here. Gigantic plot twist that I really did not see coming. And I've been studying the Bible for over 40 years, and this one caught me by surprise. It is a gigantic plot twist, but in retrospect, I should have seen it coming. Current situation. There are 10,000 Jews. Remember, the second wave's happened. Ezekiel's now in Babylon. 10,000 Jews are with him. They're in exile in Babylon. The remaining people in Jerusalem are absolutely confident that their future is just great. Now, why would they be that confident? Well, they believed that the city of Jerusalem was God's city because they had been told by the prophets of old that Jerusalem was God's city. They also believed that the temple was there and God lived in the temple. And as long as God was living there, their lives were protected and safe. It seems like they were having a bit of a memory problem about 10,000 of their fellow Judeans that all of a sudden were in exile. So what they started thinking was, well, the 10,000 that were taken away, they must have been really wicked people because God has judged them and taken them away. So the fact that we're still here means that we must be God's favorite folks. Okay? So they were very happy and very confident that they were in God's city, God's presence was in the temple, and they must be God's favored people because they weren't the ones taken away into exile. So they're breaking their own arms, patting themselves on the back about how great they must be. Jeremiah, however, who is a prophet that lives in Jerusalem at this point in time, and Ezekiel, who is in Babylon, are both doing their best to deliver the true message of what is about to happen. But I got a question. Do you think they wanted to hear that message?
No.
Absolutely not. They just believed with all their heart that life was good, they were God's favorites, and everything was going to work out just fine. They refused to listen, so much so that they put Jeremiah in prison. We don't want to hear what you got to say. You're telling us that God's going to judge? No, we don't believe that. And they had plenty of false prophets that were telling them what they wanted to hear. So they said, fine, Jeremiah, you're gone. Well, this is a summary. If you went through chapters 4 through 24 and you wanted to get a real good summary of what God says is about to happen, let me just read some of these things to you. This is what the sovereign Lord says. All of these things happen in chapter 7. Disaster, God says. These are to the people in Jerusalem. Disaster. Unheard of disaster. See? It's coming. The end. The end is coming. The end has come. See? It's coming. Doom has come upon you. Doom. Okay? The time has come. The day is near. I'm about to pour out my wrath on you and spend my anger against you. See the day. See, it comes. Doom has burst forth. Could he be any more clear about what is going to happen? None of the people will be left. None of the crowd. Now there is a remnant. The time has come. The day has arrived, for my wrath is on the whole crowd. I don't know about you, but even in my wildest delusions, I would not be able to miss that message, but they did. They didn't want to hear it. So the question has to come to your mind. That's pretty bad stuff. And by the way, when you read through some of the things that actually happened, it is horrible. I mean, worse than horrible. We're talking about when the city was in siege, there was no food. When somebody died, they cooked their body and they ate it. Okay, that's how bad it got. That's how bad it got. It was just, this is probably the most R-rated book in the entire Bible. It just gets so horrible in what it does and what God has to do to these people. And so how bad were they that they deserved this kind of judgment? Well, first of all, they had actually placed idols not only just inside the temple area, the outer courts, but they had placed idols inside the temple itself. These were idols. These were Persian and Assyrian idols. The leaders actually got together on a regular basis to worship other gods, and they were worse. God says, you have gotten so bad, you are actually worse than the pagan nations that are around you. For example, they burned their children as offerings to false gods. They tortured and killed God's prophets. For example, they put Jeremiah in prison. The thought crossed my mind that, even if God had sent his own son to Jerusalem, I would wager that they probably would have figured out a way to kill him too.
You think?
Does any of this sound familiar? They, according to God, had reached rock bottom. He was done with them. Absolutely, completely done with them. Ezekiel is taken to Jerusalem in chapters 8 through 11. We're going to focus on chapter 11, but you need to understand the context is that starting in the first verse of chapter 8, Ezekiel is sitting at home surrounded by the leaders, the Jewish leaders who are with him in exile, and they're having a big conversation. And as they're having the conversation, the Holy Spirit comes and takes Ezekiel to Jerusalem to show him a bunch of stuff. And now, at the end of chapter 11, Ezekiel's going to reappear at home. He's going to tell all the leaders everything that he's seen, heard, and witnessed. But this whole 8, 9, 10, 11, 4 chapters of Ezekiel, he is actually in the Spirit in Jerusalem. Now, I don't know if he physically left or if he was just caught up in the Spirit. I don't know, but his presence, his consciousness was in Jerusalem. And I'm thinking that a physical presence was there too, because he actually prophesied to the leaders in Jerusalem while he was there. He said the Spirit takes him up to Jerusalem, shows him the people there worshiping the other gods. And then he shows him something that I had not seen because I wasn't paying attention. Ezekiel, while he's there, actually sees God depart the temple and then depart the city. And you know, he spends so much time telling us what that the cherubim looked like and the throne looked like and all that stuff in the first few chapters. And I wondered to myself, why is he spending this much time telling us what it looks like? And the answer comes in chapter 10, because exactly the same manifestation, the same four creatures, the living creatures, the same wheels, the same wings, the same platform, the same throne, the same presence of God, all of that was exactly the same. Ezekiel witnessed that presence of God leave the temple and then eventually leave the city and go. As he left, he went to the east. Babylon is to the east. God was leaving Jerusalem and going to be with the exiles.
Aw,
How cool is
I
that?
like it.
That's the plot twist here. God explains that his plans for judgment, destruction, and restoration are going to be for Jerusalem. And the plot twist here is the people in Jerusalem, the Jews, believed because they lived in God's city and because God's presence was with them, that they must be God's favored people. And what they didn't understand, because they couldn't see what Ezekiel saw, is that God's presence left the city and left the temple. And all of a sudden, destruction is about to get them. So let's get started with the few verses that we've got. Yeah, that'll tie a knot in your stomach.
Yeah.
So how is this going to end happy? It's going to end happy.
I know.
Okay, God reveals Jerusalem's wicked leaders, all right? So we know in Jesus' day, he really was not happy with the Jewish leaders, and that was just, this is a shadow of what Jesus ran into. No wonder Ezekiel was one of his favorite books. The Lord said to me, this is Ezekiel talking, Son of man, these are the men. So remember, he's now in Jerusalem and God is showing him all the sinful stuff that's going on. He says, these are the men who are plotting evil and they're giving wicked advice in this city. They're telling lies about me and about what I'm going to do to the people of the city. They say, these wicked men, they say, haven't our houses been recently rebuilt? Doesn't my house look good? Aren't we the favored people of God? I mean, after all, we weren't taken off into exile, and you know, we live in this wonderful city. And oh, by the way, real estate's really very affordable now that all those other people are gone. I can pick up a house for a real good price. Therefore, he said, I want you to, he says, this city is a pot. This is what they say. This city is a pot and we are the meat in it. And so what are they implying here? They're implying is the city, Jerusalem is this pot, and they are a fragrant offering of God's people. They are God's fragrant people. They are now God's, their pictures on God's fridge. Okay, we are his favorites because he left us here. Okay, so we are the meat in it. Therefore, prophesy. He's telling Ezekiel, I want you to prophesy against them. Prophesy, you son of man. Okay, now we're going to skip to verse 14. The word of the Lord came to me. This is Ezekiel talking. Son of man, the people of Jerusalem are saying to about your fellow exiles and all of the other Israelites. In other words, here's what the people in Jerusalem are saying about you in exile. You exiles, you're far away from the Lord. I mean, actually, we're here in Jerusalem. God's house is here in Jerusalem, so we are actually close to the Lord. You, on the other hand, have been moved far away from the Lord. This land, this Jerusalem, this part of Judah, this land was given to us as our possession. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Okay, so now God is going to give them a message through Ezekiel. Although I sent them far away among the nations and I've scattered them among the countries, yet, here's where he gives us the clue about the plot twist. For a little while, I have been a sanctuary for them in the countries where they have gone. In other words, you may think that I'm still in the temple, that I'm still in the city. But let me tell you, you know where I really am? I am with the exiles in Babylon. That was a message that they really did not want to hear. Therefore, he says, this is what the sovereign Lord says, I will gather you. Now he's talking to the exiles. So he's making the exiles understand that they are the ones that he is concerned about. This is what the sovereign Lord says, I will gather you from the nations and I'll bring you back from the countries where you've been scattered, and I will give you back the land of Israel again. They will, he's saying about the exiles, they are going to return to it, and they're going to remove all its vile images and detestable idols. And about that point in time, I raise my hand and I say, but God, I mean, I don't want to give you advice or anything, but how is that even going to be possible? I mean, the Israelites, have been this way since the beginning. They were that way from the time they crossed the Red Sea. They've always been that way. How is it possible that they're going to return and everything's going to work out from that point forward? How is that even humanly possible? Because you know that they have rebellious, stiff-necked, and obstinate nature, and their history is all against them. So, God, what's your plan? Oh, he's got a plan. They're going to return to it, remove all its vile images and detestable idols. Here's the plan. I'm going to give them an undivided heart, and I'm going to put a new spirit in them.
Amen.
I will remove from them their heart of stone, and I'm going to give them a heart of flesh.
Amen.
They're not going to come back as the same Israelites that they left. These exiles, when I restore these exiles, they're going to be different. They're going to be recreated. They're going to be renewed. They're going to be changed. They're going to be different. Then they'll follow my decrees, because they're going to be different people, and they're going to be careful to keep my laws. They will be my people, and I will be their God. But one final warning here, as for those whose hearts are devoted to their vile images and detestable idols, I will bring down on their own heads what they have done, declares the sovereign Lord. Now, if you fast forward to chapter 36, God actually gives Ezekiel way more detail about this in verse 25 through 27. God says, I will cleanse you, this is the exiles, from your impurities and from all your idols. I will give you a new heart, and I will put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh, and I will put my spirit in you, and I will move you to follow my decrees and be careful and to keep my laws. This isn't something the Israelites are going to do for themselves. God is going to intervene in their lives. And we on this side of the cross know exactly how he does that. He does it in Jesus. And in Deuteronomy, Moses, 700 years earlier, this is so fun. They have not even gone into the promised land, and they're on the border of the promised land. Moses is about to die, but Moses gives them a final sermon. And in that sermon, Moses gives them this warning, the same warning that Ezekiel gave them. He says, you're going to rebel against God, and wherever the Lord your God disperses you among the nations, in other words, God is going to put you into exile. You are going to go there, and then the Lord your God is going to restore your fortunes and have compassion on you and gather you again from all the nations where he scattered you, even if you have been banished to the most distant land under the heavens. From there the Lord your God will gather you and bring you back. The Lord your God, catch this, the way he's going to bring you back is he's going to circumcise your hearts and the hearts of your descendants. He's going to do that. He's going to give you a new heart, and he's going to get his spirit inside you so that you may love him with all your heart and with all your soul, and you can live. That was 700 years before Ezekiel, the same message. Cool. And Ezekiel really saw another judgment. When he's seeing this judgment on Jerusalem and he's seeing this judgment on the temple, he's really seeing 400, 500 years later, because Jesus said this in Luke chapter 21, when you see Jerusalem being surrounded by armies, you're going to know that desolation is near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let those in the city get out, and let those in the country not enter the city. For this is the time of punishment and fulfillment for what Ezekiel was prophesying. So Ezekiel was prophesying about that exile, but he was also prophesying about this exile. Summary time. Wow. Just wow.
Yes.
Okay. God is finally done. What just happened here? I mean, I'm just blown away. What God has finally done is he's finally done with the old, rebellious, stiff-necked, obstinate, idol-worshiping people of the nation Israel. And he has moved out of the temple and the city of Jerusalem. Instead, he has chosen to reside in the hearts of the exiles. What does that really mean to us? We, who are Gentile exiles, who have, by faith in Jesus, received a new heart and a new spirit, we will join with the remnant of God's chosen people as we journey home. And when we come home, as Ezekiel so clearly points out at the end of his book, we are going to come back to a new Jerusalem that is perfect, and to a God who is going to dwell with us forever in a brand new temple that's also going to be perfect. And you can find that in Ezekiel 40 through 48. So what's my conclusion? I'm blown completely away here, because this is a perfect picture of the way the Jewish leaders thought when Jesus came on the scene. And it's the perfect picture of the judgment that happened 70 years after the crucifixion of Christ, when there was not one stone left on the other, and the entire wall of the city of Jerusalem was completely destroyed and burned, and the temple was destroyed as well. This is the rest of the story, I'm thinking. In the beginning, we were created to be citizens of God's garden, Adam and Eve. We were created to live in God's presence. But because of greed, remember the lesson a few weeks ago? Greed is the same thing as idolatry. And guess what God judged Jerusalem for? Idolatry, okay? Our greed, if you eat this fruit, you will be like God. We were exiled. We were thrown out. And the interesting part about it was, when we were cast out of the Garden of Eden, we were cast out of that garden to the east. Yes. However, that's not the end of the story, because God loved us and he went looking for us. Aww. He went looking for us to the east. Yes. The shadow of that was when this giant platform went out of the temple, out of the city, out the east gate, and toward Babylon. That is just a shadow of God coming looking for us. Aww. Do you remember the story of the wise men? They were from the east. Oh. And do you know why they came to Jerusalem? Or to Jerusalem, to Judea? Because they saw a star where? The star was in the west. The star was coming out. The light was coming out of Jerusalem to them, to give them the light. God was looking for them. God is coming out. He's loving us. He came for us. The rest of the story, he came looking for us. He found us. He forgave us. He redeemed us. He recreated us, gave us a new heart and a new spirit. He restored us to his presence because he came to us. And one day we will join him as exiles in a new Jerusalem with a new temple forever. And that is why we celebrate the birth of Jesus, because God came looking for us so that he could bring us home. Pray with me. Father, you loved us so much. We're out here in Babylon or Egypt or Assyria or Homosassa or wherever we live. We're out here and we're exiled. And yet you came to find us. You came for us. You sent your son and he found us. And our faith in his death gives us forgiveness. And now we are no longer exiles. We are no longer strangers. We belong to you. We are your people. And you, Father, are going to bring us back home. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, that lesson turned out completely different than what I thought it was. So let's stay tuned and see what else God has for us in the book of Ezekiel. Take care, stay healthy, and stay safe. In the meantime, we tell you goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.